Tyson White, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bora.
Tyson, great to have you on Brand Architects today. You've built some pretty incredible brands over the past 25 years, from your early days at Quicksilver, Burton, Nixon, and now Salvation Brands managing four different brands. But I'm curious, let's go way back to the beginning before we come back to the present time. What was that first moment when you realized you had an eye for building brands?
I mean, I think I was thinking about it when I was in high school. And where I grew up, it had become it was the makings of a sort of like a hotbed for brands to sort of incubate and be born out of. This was Orange County, California. And, so many brands were born there or established themselves there. So it was always part of the culture, and brands like Volcom were just being born and being launched and all that. And so when I was 19, I launched a brand, and I started making T-shirts and hats and hoodies and stuff like that. And I did that for a couple years. It took me a couple years to figure out that no matter how great the business plan or how smart I seemed, no one was going to loan a 19-year-old kid or 20-year-old kid, $100,000 to just, go blow on whatever, because experience matters. But after a couple years, and we'd had accounts and we had, sales reps, and we'd had fun. It was great. But I knew that I had a passion for that world, truly, not just, it wasn't just an idea, a cool, fun idea when you're in high school or a kid. And so I knew that I wanted to, learn and invest my career path in that. And so I went to go work for one of the big guys. I went to Quicksilver, and I wanted to just be a sponge, and because I had owned my own company, I've always approached how I operate within those companies. If I'm in like sort of the corporate space, I would always operate like, well, what would I do if I was the CEO? And truly, like from the earliest days, and I never said no. I took on everything I possibly could. I wanted to learn everything. I looked for low-hanging fruit and opportunities everywhere. So I excelled really, really quickly in that space. It was also we look back and we joke now that it was the glory days of that industry. It was just booming, just starting to boom. Quicksilver, I got to Quicksilver in 1995. The year before, they had just hit 100 million. That was a first for anyone in that space. They went public also too, and then I was there for the next 6 years, and I think we were like 800 million by the time I left. It was a rocket ship. The whole industry was growing that way, so it created a lot of opportunities at the time I didn't see. So like my successful trajectory, if you could call it that. It was being in the right place at the right time too. Like I got fortunate that I had these opportunities and these people that gave these opportunities to me, and I also fought for them. But yeah, even back in those days, I was always looking for opportunities that weren't being realized by the brand. Like at that point in time, Quicksilver was not competitive with what Volcom was doing. Volcom was a whole different level of distribution that Quicksilver couldn't access. And so I came up with this idea and I proposed to Bob, the CEO, and the top management that we should create a brand. We called it X70, and that should be, going after that market. And that market was more skate and snow and street, less surf, and the traditional surf brands didn't fit there, but we made awesome product. There were so many talented people within the organization. We just needed to reposition or reframe it and call it something else. And so we did that, and we did that for a few years, and it was fun and successful. I mean, it did, I think, like 7 million at its peak, but yeah, that was a fun thing. So that was kind of like my first sort of test post starting my own brand to see if I could sort of build on that, So, yeah.
So what was the first one? What was the transition out of all this experience at big brand building at Quicksilver and others, and when you caught aside from when you were 19 years old, you had already caught the entrepreneurship bug, but your first post big company experience now leading to starting your own brand. What year was that, and which one was the first one?
I mean, to quickly back up, like always I was always the person that would take on the hard project, but the one that seemed like it was, massive unrealized potential. And so sometimes that was starting a new division. I did that with Burton. We created the Burton Basics division, which is basically all the non-technical soft goods. And we took that from $1 million to 8 first year, 8 to 13, 13 to 27, and then by the fourth year it was like 45 million. It got much bigger after that, but it was always like, or it was the new startup brand within the bigger brand house. And so that was analog with Burton. They wanted to get into apparel, and they thought I was the guy to help them do that. And so we created this brand. It had already existed a little bit. It was a limited edition line within the Burton line, and I had pitched to them, why don't we take that and make that the apparel brand versus creating a whole new brand. It already had some cred, so we were going to leverage that. So I always done, when I went to Diesel, I worked I was a marketing director for their 55 DSL line, so like the startup within the bigger thing again. So that was always kind of my specialty. When I was at Nixon, it was equally overseeing all things product, but and then where can we create innovations there? Like we built a smartwatch with Google and Qualcomm, after researching it for years, award-winning. It got, a massive amount of press. We have patents and all, it was a really fun project. And then the other really notable product was a watch we designed for the Navy SEALs and Special Forces. That ended up being, and there's an interesting point there that I'll come back to later, but it changed my thinking. It was the most purpose-built thing I'd ever created, or led the creation of. And it was super rewarding to do that. And that changed the way that I looked at everything I'd done before. It made me no longer want to do anything that was fast fashion, and that industry is very much chasing four seasons, fast fashion, get in, get out. What's the hot new color palette this season? Or what's the new trend? We got to jump on that. It was, and by the time I got to my final couple of years at Nixon, I was so done in my mind with like chasing fast fashion. I had the early makings of what is now a specialist came out of my last couple of years at Nixon, because we'd done so many really fun things, like countless collabs and limited edition and licensing and really cool things. But by that point I was pretty done investing any energy or any money into things that weren't like really unique and like meaningful, And so I didn't immediately get into brands that are like the brands that I'm in now. But when I left Nixon, I was a little bit like disenchanted, not with them. I love the founders and the company and all that, but that was a private equity play, and it was very much like, and I was part of the group that was hired to come in and take Nixon, buy it back from Billabong and like kind of build it into something much bigger. And so we were all incentivized and we had equity, and it didn't go the way it should have gone. The playbook was there, and we had a CEO that didn't run that playbook. And I left there like I never want to be like handcuffed, with my livelihood and my potential for growth or earnings to be so tied to someone else's bad decisions, And so I left there and I was like, I just want to invest in things I believe in and people I want to work with. And I don't want to work with assholes. I was like very much like, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And I didn't know exactly what the right call was there, or the right path. I just knew that I wanted to do something different and more pure, quite honestly. Like I did want to build things, but I wanted to build them my way and the way that I thought was the right way versus just playing the same playbook that everyone had played for 20, 25 years prior. And then I had so many successes and accolades and all these things. But when I look back, it was less rewarding than what I thought would be rewarding by doing things that were more meaningful. So I left there and I invested in a company. I started consulting for different brands and like sat on boards and things like that. And I invested in a company called PowerDot, and that was not in the space I was in at all, but they had some of their path to growth, were in the wheelhouse that like I had, already lived in for a while and had a lot of experience in. So I could add value to that. But that was in the health and fitness space. That was a muscle stimulation device that was app controlled, very revolutionary at the time. That space was very old and archaic, and so it was fun and exciting. And it was because I'd just done the smartwatch project with Nixon. Like I was very much in like the consumer, wearable electronics mindset and experience, and so that wasn't that much of a departure, even though I wasn't necessarily from the health and fitness space. Anyways, we built that up. We eventually sold that. That's sold in 21 for $34 million. We sold it to Therabody, or it was Theragun, and now it's Therabody. And that was fun. That was a nice win, and it kind of let me kind of keep going and investing in more things. And then I don't know. I mean, if you have any other questions, but immediately I invested in new things like the Brown Buffalo, and then it was Ruby Mint, and it was also bootcap at the same time. And now I'm like kind of kick myself. I'm like I didn't make any wrong calls, right? But like it is quite stressful trying to manage 4 brands at the same time, and all the things that come along with them. And they're all in different phases in their lifespan, and some are still it's startup in a lot of ways, but it's fun, but.
Well, now I understand why everything is the way it is. Hearing you talk about the Navy SEAL project, that was a click moment for you, where you worked on something technical, sounds like, and purpose built, and you kind of compared that experience to fast fashion seasons, color palettes and things like that. But now I'm looking at Specialist, SPC/LSD. That stands for Specialist. There's something really intentional about that positioning. Also, Brown Buffalo, technical, bootcap, Ruby Mint. When you kind of read them, it looks like they solve real problems. It's not just random clothing or accessories. So it seems like what happened back then carried its motivation all the way until now. Is that the right way to interpret this?
100%. I think they're all different. They're all the same in the sense that they all aim to be best in class brands and products. And sometimes they live together. They fit in the same space, but it isn't the traditional portfolio, which I always admired. When you had these big groups, it was smart to fill out the portfolio with all the different categories, and then you have a sales force that can go sell to those retailers that had the portfolio and have everything covered. Billabong was a good example of that. They had the shoes, and they had the watches, and they had the skate stuff and the surf stuff, and it was a really good. I won't name all the brands, but it's a smart strategy. This is different. It's more starting with the purity of what's that brand trying to do, and do I want to be a part of it or help build it, or am I passionate about it? So it's more trying to build the hero brands, and if they fit together, and so Specialist and Brown Buffalo fit very closely together. That's 80% the same customer. That's lucky. It wasn't intentional, but the intent there was just work on great stuff that you're passionate about, that stands for something. So that's really the approach. That's kind of how I ended up there. But they all do what the similar thread throughout all of them is that they're trying to be something different. And to the point you just made, I actually haven't had anyone call that out in that way, but that's exactly what I guess at the core of it I'm trying to do is build these things that have meaning, and have that are solving a real life problem, even the Ruby Mint, it's a beach towel or it's a beach accessories brand, but it's 40% bigger, it's 40% heavier weight, it's twice the quality. It's sustainably grown, low Ecotech certified cotton, organic cotton, and it serves the female audience. And where a lot of the brands in that space aren't doing that, they're what I keep calling dude brands. They're cool brands, but if you look at it, it feels very masculine and dude brand. And so that's solving I think a real problem. There's white space in that market for that. Bootcap is it's an invention which we have patented every conceivable way that you can, and it's a one-of-a-kind product. Like, no one can make that, and it solves a real life problem. If you ski, your toes get cold, and this is a simple, affordable product that changes the game. Like, if your toes are cold, it can mean the difference between a good day skiing and a terrible one, or whether you stay out longer or you quit. And so that one's been really exciting. And quite honestly, that one I didn't even know. When I invested in that one, I'm a snowboarder. I just happened to meet the guy who invented it. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. Can I see all the data and the science behind it? And I was blown away. I'm like, this should be a thing, and it took us way longer. And that may be something we could talk about too, but it took us way longer to get that one off the ground than we ever thought. We were just in development for 5 years, 4 solid years, before it saw the light of day. And all these have been on different journeys, right? And different levels of difficulty to get to market. But yeah, they're all trying to solve a real life problem. Like Specialist is, intentionally not playing by anyone's rules. We're literally like, I don't care what anyone's price points are. I don't care what a buyer thinks. I'm like, or I don't want to be influenced by any particular type of retailer or anything. It's like building products that we believe that we need in our lives and doing it the best way that you can possibly build those things, or building them the best way that you can. And it starts from the ground up. And that's the fundamental difference between that brand and pretty much every other brand out there, is we're not coming from, okay, this brand that we admire has a jacket at this price point. We've got to make that same jacket, and then you're trying to work backwards to a margin. We just build it. We like, okay, what does it need? How should it fit? What material should it be made out of? What's the best possible construction practice we can put into that? How do we make it reinforced and last longer than your typical, apparel garment or whatever? And so we just build it from the ground up. And if it ends up being a $1,200 item, then it's a $1,200 item. As it's turned out, like they're not overpriced. We were in fear that we would be making these things that were priced out of the price range or too much for people. And they're not. They're actually really, we can still make really good product affordably. But most brands aren't doing that. They're looking for every single corner that they can cut to squeeze the maximum amount of profit out of it. We just have a margin that we're trying to get, that is fair for us, but also fair to the consumer. So it's literally a 4x from cost, and if we can make something for $25 and sell it for $100, that's fine. If it costs us $300 and we have to sell it for $1,200, so that there's a wholesale, I can sell it to a wholesaler and also sell it direct to consumer, then that's what we do, that's a different approach, like very different. And it starts with the purpose of the product. And selfishly, we're just kind of building stuff that we want to wear or use. We have travel bags because we travel so much, and it's very different in the way I've ever done anything else, and it feels good. It's a little bit, we're out kind of in the wilderness a little bit, like trying to figure out if that's going to resonate with people. But surprisingly, it being purely a DTC brand from the start, we're now moving into wholesale because the universe is telling us to, because we're getting hit up all over the place from wholesale or retailers and reps that want to sell it and people that are really excited by it, and so that's really fun.
Are we talking about Specialist for retail and wholesale? Like what kind of would they go into? I guess Specialist shops, more like surf shops, or kind of cooler indie boutique type of places, I imagine.
Yeah, we have we don't have any desire to play in action sports firmly. I think if there were a very elevated surf shop, that sold premium products somewhere, we're not anti. I love that the sports. I grew up doing all those things, and I used to love the culture of, the industry of it. It just like kind of lost its soul, which isn't like a mystery. That's pretty common knowledge now, but the fundamental reason why we don't want to play in action sports is because you can't make good product at those price points. Like you've got to make a a short for $50, you know, that costs $6.70. And it's made out of crappy fabric, and you're trying to find the cheapest manufacturer in the world that may not have sustainable practices or fair trade, or it's just like, it's not living its best self, or like, you know, operating the best way it can. So, and I don't want to be influenced by that either. I just want to make stuff that we believe in and sell it to people that are like-minded, you know, and so far that's actually working out. We've opened, you know, a small handful of doors. We just, you know, hired a rep that's going, and so to answer your question, it's going after premium men's boutiques. And it has, when you see the next line that comes out, it balances out the identity from a product standpoint. This first line, which is really like our spring summer line, it's more active. So it has, you know, things like board shorts in it, or we call them trunks, but they're board shorts basically. We happen to know how to make board shorts because we've made them for so many years in the action sports industry. So they're, you know, as best in class, you know, out of the gates. We don't have to learn how to do that because we know how to do that. But we didn't design that so that we could put them in surf shops. We made that because that's what we need.
Right.
And, you know, everybody wears those. And even if you're just going to the pool and you don't surf, but you're going to a resort, we have that in our arsenal, I guess, for people to buy from us. So the approach is go to best in class, build best in class products, and go to what we think is best in class retailers. Very much men's focused, and then see what happens from there. You know, not trying to force it. If it ends up being a small brand that we're super passionate about and we believe in it, I'm okay with that too. If it has a life bigger than that and it takes off, you know, and it turns into a multi-$100-million brand, that's great too. I don't have any preconceived sort of goals that I have to. I mean, of course I want it to be successful, but it's more important for it to be pure, honestly, and do something I'm proud of.
Yeah. So you've got this concept of person built as your tagline. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that touches back, or that refers back to what I was sort of referencing or whatever. We're building for the person more than we're like, it does hint at purpose built, but it's more than that. It's, we're building for the person. So I look at it like, you know, we should be able, I don't want to be stuck to any one category or class of product. We want to have the freedom to make all the things that we need, you know, that you wear or carry. And so if at some point we are actually going to be doing sunglasses. Jeff Johnson and a guy named Josh Hartley and I are all kind of branching off to do specialist eyewear because we love the category and we think that it's a big one that we all wear. And it just, you know, we want the freedom to make that too. So it's more like wanting to make all the items that our customer, our guy, or us can wear head to toe. You know, we're not going to get into underwear anytime soon, but, you know, we might do footwear at some point, you know, because that we find a need and we finally get there and say, well, we want to be able to cover that too. But we're only going to do it if we can do it at a really high level. So we're trying to like basically outfit our guy or ourselves, with all the things that we know how to make and make them at a really high level. Does that make sense?
It does. So what I find fascinating, specialist, is how you're balancing technical functionality with this incredible aesthetic beauty. This timeless design, and just by looking at it, it's obvious to me that it's not easy to nail that down. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your process, how you kind of develop the concepts, how do you go from idea to iterations to kind of testing and getting feedback, and how long does it take for you to go from kind of like concept to sale?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. It didn't have a name forever. You know, I think we literally called it New Brand for like 2 years when it was just an idea. And we didn't want to force that either. You know, we were just kind of, hey, let's work on this really fun concept, you know, where we're going to build things from a more pure perspective and a higher quality product, and then make all the things that we think that we need in our lives and try to make the icons out of the gates, build the most important products that we all wear and need, and don't get caught up in I've got to make 30 woven shirts so that Nordstrom might buy a few of them. You know, it was a totally different approach. So we started just with like the concept, and just started making things. And like more and more we were like, kind of felt like we were on a path. And yeah, we didn't, there's not one part of it that we forced, you know, even naming was like a thing it took us forever to land on. Lots of internal battles on that. But we did from the outset set out to build something that we were proud of on every level. You know, one of the things that like, I think is really important, and it's actually really rare that a brand will be both phenomenally great at product and marketing at the same time. It's usually heavy in one or the other, or it's a sales-driven company and they're just really good at banging out the hits, and they just, not doing anything especially great in product or marketing, but they're a really solid sales-driven organization. I don't care about that just yet. I'm more drawn to the brands that have a beautiful aesthetic and have I think it's really important to stand out and differentiate. Like, it's really easy to do what everyone else is doing and bang out an ad campaign that it's ticking all the boxes, but it's not terribly interesting. And so, and then some of that's inspired by like, a lot of people wouldn't maybe remember this, but like, there was a time 25 years ago when like Diesel was the coolest brand on the planet.
Oh, I remember.
And a lot of that was
it was coveted.
Yeah. Their ads were amazing. It was like, and what they did at their fundamental core is they made you stop. You always paid attention to those ads. And if you're flipping through a magazine back then, when people, it was like you always stopped on those ads. Well, you can't have a better impact on the consumer than just making them stop and pay attention. Even if they're scratching their head, it's better than them flipping past. And so I've always been inspired by that. I wanted to create a brand that like made people, inspired people, like the brand itself inspired people. Even if it's from both an aesthetic, like is it beautiful, but also like in a provocative way, and so, and then balance that out with product that we believe in and we think is best in class, and we're trying to marry those two things together. And if you look at the website or you see any of the advertising, it was meant to make people scratch their head a little bit, like, whoa, what is that, and it's been really fun to see how overwhelmingly positive the feedback from that has been. I get hit up on LinkedIn all the time from people I admire and I'm not even connected to, and they're like, I love what you guys are doing. It stands out in a sea of things that are the same, and it's just really fun. I'm proud of you guys. Like, how can I help? It's really, that part to me is maybe the most rewarding thing. And I've made new friends from it too, which is really, really fun.
Yeah. Do you know this Swedish band called Fever Ray?
Yeah.
Your brand is like the Fever Ray of clothing. It's like this dark, cool, Nordic noir kind of a vibes. But it's just like very niche and very cool. And the naming, you said that you had internal debates about the naming. I like the naming. I'm an engineer. I like those technical things, just abbreviations and slashes and things like that, dots, underscores. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, since you have a background in creative arts and creative director, beautiful brands, you talk about how Diesel's ads were making people stop. I remember those days in the 90s. They were just like, oh, so good. And but now here we are. Every day is like a new AI development it's kind of like shaking up everything. Just, my timeline is a mix of dread and excitement. Where are you on the scale? Are you more worried that the craft of taste and aesthetics and creativity is going the way of McDonald's defying, or are you kind of like more excited about the possibilities of what's to come?
I'm honestly torn. Like I'm both like an idealist and a realist at the same time, and that's kind of a funny line to try to ride. But on one hand, I think it's terrifying, like how rapidly it's progressing. I just saw like a post on it was Eric Schmidt, I think former CEO of Google, might still, I don't know, I don't follow Google that closely, but and he was talking about how quickly it's learned how to like improve itself. Like we don't need to do that anymore. It does it on its own, you know. And that alone is like, well, where does it go? And there's a prediction that it's gonna, you know, it's gonna be a super intelligence within the next couple of years, meaning it will have, it'll be more intelligent than the sum of humankind. Like that's crazy. You know, how do you control that? It takes an enormous amount of power to power that, but like, so we still have control over that part, right? But like, where does that go? No one knows, you know? And so that part, that's a little bit terrifying, but at the same time, I'm also, the realist in me is like, you know, people who, plain and simple, people who don't learn how to adopt it and leverage it are going to be left behind. And that's like, only in the last like 6 months has that shift happened in my own mind. I've been like, ooh, it's scary, and like, how do you use it? And now it's like, we're all leaning in, you know? And whether it turns into the destruction of mankind or not, we're eventually, like, we're not going to be able to stop that, you know? In fact, it's almost better to embrace it and be part of it than to reject it, because I think the people that reject it are going to be left behind on the sidelines at the very least.
How are you embracing it at your brands?
You know, we have I think one of the best things that we have in our organizations, we have a range of experience and age. And so, you know, some of us on the older end, you know, we benefit the group because we have decades of experience in business and in making things and doing things and all that. And then we have people on the younger scale age that, you know, they don't, all they know is to use the modern tools, you know. And so quite honestly, the older generation is like learning from the younger generation and like, check out what this does, and hey, you can use it this way. And I'm actually seeing quite a few of my friends that are sort of like in my peer group and other that don't work for us, but they, you know, they do other things, and the smart ones are all adopting it quickly, you know. And we're like, you know, comparing notes on like, did you know it could do this? You know, and it's like, no. And then, so we're trying to stay current and at the forefront of how you can use it. But I don't, yeah, we're not using it to design just yet. We're using it more on a tactical business level and on marketing, and, you know, how that integrates with digital media, you know, and digital advertising. Mm-hmm. But I think soon we're going to be able to use it. We're going to be using it more and more on the design side of things. We're just testing it right now.
My final question, top 2 problems giving you a headache right now, and top 2 priorities you're excited for the year.
I mean, cash flow is always, you know, cash flow with one brand is hard enough. Even if you're doing well, you know, you run into situations where like you've got to buy next season, you know, and you're managing cash flow and you're growing and all that, but you just don't have a massive amount of a chunk of cash just sitting around, you know, because we're self-funded. We don't have a big parent that's just dumping money into it. We built it ourselves, you know, so that's always stressful. I think, yeah, and then to answer the other question, the thing I'm the most excited about, I'm just excited to see where these brands go. Like, as stressful as it is, I think we're good at what we do, and there's the experiences there. I believe in all the brands, like Specialist, the Brown Buffalo, Ruby Mint, Bootcap, and they all have different meanings. But like I can see where they will all end up, and that journey has always been really fun for me. And the people who persevere, you know, if you can ride through the hard times and the tough times and the bootstrap and all those things that like are really, you know, people underestimate. If you can get past that, you know, and just persevere and focus on it, you end up one day with a successful brand, if you're even half good at what you do. So that's my goal, is to get those to that place.
Tyson White, thank you for sharing your journey with me.
Thanks, Bora. Great to connect with you.